I was sitting in the executive conference room on the top floor of Horizon Tech, my hands still resting on the laptop keyboard. 10 minutes earlier, I had just sent Damien the renewal projections for our 3 largest clients. Those 3 contracts alone were enough to secure 70% of Horizon Tech's cash flow for the entire year. 10 minutes later, my name appeared at the very top of the Project Vanguard list. On the large screen, the first column read in clear black and white Victoria Ellison, Head of Strategic Accounts, salary reduced by 40%. Performance bonuses suspended. The room went completely still. The only sound left was the low, steady hum of the air conditioning. Damien stood at the head of the long table, his charcoal suit still perfectly pressed, his voice calm and measured. The company is undergoing an organizational adjustment. Senior management will lead by example. I hope everyone on this list understands. He did not look at me. He deliberately avoided my eyes. Sitting to his right, Nathan Vale looked up, with carefully arranged concern and said in a soft voice, "Damien, isn't this a bit sudden? Victoria is handling so many critical projects. Won't this upset her?" It was only his 7th day at the company. His title was Special Advisor to the CEO. Yet, his desk had already been placed right next to the Strategic Accounts Department. He knew nothing about our clients or our contracts, but he was already sitting in on executive meetings. Damien glanced at him, and his tone softened. The company doesn't operate based on who works the hardest. It operates based on the overall strategic arrangement. Someone in the room coughed. I saw Gabriel Shaw's face change. The sales director I had personally mentored. He knew about the international video conferences last month, where I had slept only 8 hours across 3 consecutive days. He also knew the company had survived the previous year, only because I had won back 3 major clients we were about to lose. But no one spoke, because the person saying these words was Damien Crowe, the CEO, and my husband of 5 years. I looked down and opened the Vanguard notification that had just synced to my email. It had been sent from HR, with Damien, the CFO, and the board office all CC'd. The timestamp was 9:27 a.m. That meant he had already signed off on it before the meeting even began. I downloaded the email and quietly saved it, along with a photo of the presentation screen, to my personal cloud drive. My movements were so slight that no one noticed. Nathan was still speaking, voice soft and carefully crafted. "Actually, I can take a pay cut too. I just got here. We can't let Victoria bear this all by herself." But I had already seen the seating chart on his desk. It clearly stated that Strategic Accounts Team 1, Team 2, and Team 3 were to be gradually transitioned to the Nathan Vale Project Synergy Group over the next 3 months, so it wasn't just a pay cut. He was planning to take my clients, my team, and my budget, piece by piece. I suddenly found it almost funny. The year the company was founded, Damien had sat on the floor of our rented apartment, holding a business plan no one believed in, and said to me, "Tori, when Horizon Tech makes it, I'll make sure you have the brightest seat in the house." I believed him. I went with him to meet investors. I chased clients. I sat in conference rooms until 2 a.m. getting yelled at. The company did make it, but the brightest seat was now being given to Nathan Vale. And I was being placed on a Vanguard list to make room for him. Damien finally turned to me. "Victoria, you're a veteran of this company. You, more than anyone, need to understand the bigger picture." I had heard that phrase too many times. When Nathan first joined and didn't know the business. "You need to train him. It's for the bigger picture." When Damien's mother preferred Nathan, "Don't mind her. It's for the bigger picture." On my birthday, when he went to the airport to pick Nathan up, because he just got back and doesn't know anyone. That was also for the bigger picture. Now I, the person who brought in 70% of the revenue, had to step aside for him. And that, too, was for the bigger picture. I closed my laptop. The sound wasn't loud, but it made everyone at the table look over. Damien frowned. "The meeting isn't over." I stood up and pushed my chair neatly back into place. "My part in it is." Nathan flinched, putting on a look of deep concern. "Victoria, please don't misunderstand. Damien didn't mean it that way. If you're unhappy, I can go talk to HR. You don't have to, I said, looking straight at him. You weren't the one who signed this list. Nathan Den's face went pale. Damien's voice finally dropped. Victoria, this is the office. I know. I picked up my phone and showed him the email I had just saved, which is why I'm following company procedure. With that, I turned and walked out of the conference room. I heard a sharp intake of breath behind me. Damien called my name, Victoria Ellison. I didn't turn back. The hallway was long. The glass walls reflected my face. No tears, no loss of control. I was even calmer than when I had first walked into that meeting. The receptionist saw me and immediately stood up. Miss Ellison, is Claire in? In HR. I nodded and walked straight toward the Human Resources Department. My phone buzzed. A message from Damien, don't make a scene. Keep this professional. I stared at the text for 2 seconds, then took a screenshot and saved it. He still thought I was just throwing a tantrum. The door to the HR office was ajar. Claire Donovan looked up and saw me. Her expression shifted from surprise to understanding. She stood so Victoria. I placed my phone on her desk, showing her the Vanguard notification. I need to process my resignation right now. Claire froze. Right now? Her voice dropped. Does Damien know? I smiled. He personally told me 10 minutes ago that the company isn't about who works the hardest. It's about the overall strategic arrangement. Claire didn't speak. She had been in HR for 6 years. She had seen me in the conference room at 3 a.m. revising proposals. She had also seen Damien hand the first glass of champagne at a celebration dinner to an investor, while completely forgetting to introduce the woman standing right beside him. She opened the system, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Victoria, you're in a key position. Standard procedure requires a 1-month transition period. I pushed a pre-organized folder toward her. All project timelines, client contacts, contract milestones, and risk assessments. I updated them last night. The handover person can sign off on it now. Claire looked up in astonishment. I said calmly, I always leave a clean paper trail. She finally understood I wasn't being impulsive. 10 minutes later, the resignation application was generated. I signed it and submitted it. The system popped up a notification. Process has entered the approval stage. At the same time, hurried footsteps came from the direction of the conference room. Damien had arrived. He stood at the door of the HR office, face grim. Victoria Ellison. Come out here. I didn't move. If you have something to say it here. Claire lowered her head, pretending to look at her computer. Damien suppressed his anger. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I looked at him. Resigning. Just because of the Vanguard list. No. I picked up a pen from Claire's desk and signed the last page of the handover confirmation. It's because I finally realized that to you, I will always come second to the bigger picture. His brow furrowed even deeper. Nathan just joined the company. He's young and can be difficult. I'll move you back in 3 months. Do you have to blow this up right now? A few employees walking by slowed their pace. Nathan had followed and was standing behind Damien, eyes wet. I looked at Damien and suddenly lost the last shred of desire to explain myself. So in his eyes, my being placed on a demotion list, having my team taken away, being publicly humiliated, all of it was just Nathan being difficult, and his compensation to me was to give me back what was rightfully mine in 3 months. I kept the pen. Mr. Crow, the process is complete. Damien's face changed. What did you just call me? I picked up my phone and bag and walked past him. In the office, it's Mr. Crow, of course. As for home, we'll talk tonight. I didn't look at his expression. I only heard Nathan whisper behind me. Damien, did I cause trouble for you? Damien didn't answer. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. In the reflection, I saw the ring on my left hand. I had worn it for 5 years. The inside was engraved with the words, "My constant." I stared at it for a few seconds, then took it off and placed it deep inside my purse. The elevator doors slowly closed. This time, I wasn't holding up the bigger picture for anyone. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, my phone was already blowing up. The first call was from Damien. The second was also from Damien. The third was from Nathan. I didn't answer any of them. The young receptionist saw me come out, her eyes red. Miss Ellison. Are you really leaving? I took off my ID badge and placed it on the reception tray. Yes. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but the words never came. The earliest employees of Horizon Tech all knew I wasn't just the boss's wife who had been parachuted in. Damien and I had painted the walls and moved the desks into our first office together. I had waited outside a client's building for 3 days just to get a 10-minute meeting for our first major contract. The first time our funding dried up, I sold my premarital condo to cover 2 months of company salaries. None of that had ever been written into a company announcement. Today, the only thing written into an announcement was my demotion. Just as I reached the revolving door, I heard hurried footsteps. Victoria Ellison. Damien had followed me down. Nathan trailed behind him, clutching a stack of files, looking flustered and carefully innocent. Many employees in the lobby were watching. Damien lowered his voice. Do you have to make such an ugly scene at the office? I stopped. The ugly scene wasn't made by me. Nathan immediately stepped forward. Victoria, please don't misunderstand. I really didn't know about that list. I'm new. I don't know anything. Damien just wanted me to get up to speed quickly. He didn't mean to take your position. I glanced at him. Then, what is that client transition plan in your hand? Nathan's face froze. He subconsciously tried to hide the files behind his back. Damien frowned. That's just a temporary collaboration. A collaboration that requires my clients to be divided into groups, and their budgets, authority, and contract approval paths to all be changed to his name. The lobby grew quieter. A flicker of real annoyance finally crossed Damien's face. When did you become so vindictive? I let out a soft laugh. That single sentence was more sobering than the demotion list itself. So if I stopped enduring, I was being combative. If I asked for the facts, I was not giving him face. I took a printed handover checklist from my bag and placed it on the reception desk. Mr. Crow, I've sent all project materials to HR and your email. Client communication logs, contract milestones, risk items, and outstanding payments. I've archived them all according to company policy. Damien was taken aback. He probably hadn't expected me to resign by handing everything over impeccably rather than storming out and giving him a chance to find fault. You were prepared for this. Not for long, I said. I just never let myself be the one holding the bag for anything I do. Nathan's eyes grew redder. Victoria, do you think Damien has been paying too much attention to me since I came back? We just grew up together. He has always respected you. Respected me? I looked at Damien. His way of respecting me is to let me see my own name on a demotion list in an executive meeting instead of telling me a single word beforehand. Damien's face darkened. I was planning to explain it to you after the meeting. Explain what? I stared at him. Explain that Nathan is just being difficult, so I need to be demoted to make way for him. Explain that you'll move me back in 3 months and that I should be grateful. At that, Nathan's expression completely froze, because those were the exact words Damien had just said at the HR office door. The employees' gazes shifted. Some looked down at their phones, some looked at Nathan, some looked at Damien. Damien's jaw tightened. Victoria, that's enough. Enough? I nodded. I think so too. I turned to leave. Damien stepped squarely in front of me, blocking my path. His physical presence carried a familiar sense of command. For the past 5 years, whenever he held me like this, I would stop. At networking events, at his family's dinner table, whenever I wanted to defend myself, one grip and I would endure it for him. Not today. I looked at him coldly. Step aside. Damien froze. Victoria, I said, let go. My voice wasn't loud, but the whole lobby heard it. Nathan let out a soft gasp. Damien finally released his grip. A faint red mark remained on my wrist. I took a sanitizing wipe from my bag and cleaned the spot as if wiping away the last trace of an old habit. Damien, before today I was your wife and the head of business for this company. After today, at least the second role has ended. He stared at me. You think the clients will follow you if you leave the company? I don't think that, I said, putting the wipe away. But I do know that clients won't stick with a company that can so casually sacrifice its core leadership for long. Damien sneered. You think too highly of yourself. I nodded. Then let's just say I do. With that, I walked out of the company building. The late spring wind carried a hint of warmth. The young driver, Alex, ran out after me holding my backup water bottle. Miss Ellison, your bottle. I took it. Thanks. He hesitated for a long time before whispering, Miss Ellison, everyone knows you've been wronged. I shook my head. Being wronged is useless. I looked up at the glass facade of the building. From now on, everyone has to rely on their own merits. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the HR system. Your resignation application has been submitted, pending CEO approval. I immediately forwarded it to Claire Donovan. According to my employment contract, I have the right to request immediate termination. All handover materials have been submitted. Please provide written confirmation of the calculation for unused vacation days, performance bonuses, and vested stock options as per policy. Claire replied quickly, understood. Victoria, I got into the car, opened my laptop, and backed up all my personal files from the company's cloud drive one more time. For years, Damien had called me his anchor. But even anchors get tired. Halfway home, Damien's call came again. I declined it. He sent a text. We'll talk when you get home tonight. I looked at it for a long time and replied with 4 words, we can clear things up. Then I opened an app and ordered 10 large cardboard boxes. Not to move my things from the office, but to move out of our home. At 7 that evening, I returned to our marital house. The lock recognized my fingerprint and clicked softly open. We had bought this place in the 2nd year of our marriage. I had designed the layout myself. I had hand-picked the lamp in the living room, the one with the warm amber shade that used to make the whole space feel soft at night. Even the small wooden tray for keys in the entryway was something I had brought back from a tiny shop during a business trip to Kyoto 3 years ago. But today, standing at the threshold, the house felt as unfamiliar as a model home staged for strangers. Damien wasn't back yet. He probably still believed I would be waiting for him the way I always had. Lights on, dinner ready, prepared to listen to whatever explanation he decided to give, ready to accept that I was simply being too sensitive again. I didn't turn on the living room lights. I walked straight to the study and opened the safe. Inside were 3 carefully organized categories of documents. First, my personal identification, proof of premarital assets, and the complete bank records from the year I sold my condo to keep Horizon Tech alive. Second, the early loan agreements for the company, and the formal documents that had eventually released me from the personal guarantees I had signed when no bank would touch us. Third, ownership and contribution records for the company's major projects over the years, contracts I had closed, relationships I had built, risks I had absorbed without ever putting my name on the public credit. I hadn't prepared these today. I came from a business background. I knew the most unreliable thing in the world was a verbal promise between 2 people who loved each other. Damien used to say we were husband and wife. There was no need to be so meticulous. I had laughed and told him that being clear now prevented misunderstandings later. He never liked hearing it, but I kept the records anyway. Not because I was guarding against him, but because I was guarding against a day when I could no longer even articulate what I had given. I packed the documents into the boxes one by one, labeling each folder with quiet precision. Suddenly my phone lit up. A friend request from Nathan Vale. The note attached read, Victoria, I'm sorry, I really don't want to affect you, and Damien and I glanced at it and didn't accept. A second later, a text message arrived from the same number. Victoria, I know you don't like me, but Damien has been really tired these past few years. He said he can only stop being a CEO when he's with me. You're his wife. You should want him to be relaxed more than I do, right? I stared at the message for a long time without moving. So it wasn't only the company he wanted to enter. He wanted to enter my marriage, to tell me, gently and with that soft, wounded tone, that he was the person with whom Damien could finally stop performing. I took a screenshot, saved it, and continued packing. At 8:30, the front door opened. Damien came in, still carrying the chill of the evening air. He saw the cardboard boxes stacked near the study door and stopped. "What are you doing?" I sealed the last document into a waterproof bag. Moving out. His face changed. "Victoria, the resignation. I can treat it as an impulse. But what does moving out mean?" "Exactly what it sounds like." He walked into the study and saw the half-empty safe. His voice hardened. "You're even taking the documents from the house." "My personal documents. Of course I'm taking them." Damien stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Do you have to take things this far?" I turned to face him fully. "Which step is that?" "When you put me on the demotion list, did you think about that step? When you placed Nathan in my department and prepared to hand over my clients, did you think about that step?" He pressed his temples with both hands. "I told you Nathan just joined the company. He needs opportunities. You're capable. Taking a step back temporarily won't affect you." I laughed once, quietly. So I took a step back. He was stunned. "You know that's not what I mean." "I know." I pushed one of the boxes toward the door with my foot. "You mean I should step back but not actually leave? I should give up my position but still be responsible for cleaning up the mess. My salary can be cut but I can't be unhappy. I should be replaced, but I still have to teach my replacement how to take my place." Damien fell silent because every word was true. After a few seconds, he softened his tone, the way he always did when he wanted the conversation to turn in his favor. "Victoria, we've been married for 5 years. You don't need to negate everything between us just because of a work arrangement." "A work arrangement?" I took out my phone and showed him Nathan's text message. "He told me you only stop being a CEO when you're with him. Is this also a work arrangement?" Damien saw the message and frowned. "He didn't mean it that way. You haven't even asked him, and you already know he didn't mean it that way." My voice stayed light. "Damien, you're too practiced at defending him." A flash of irritation crossed his eyes. "Nathan's family went through a tough time. He hasn't had it easy these years. Have I?" The study fell completely silent. I looked at him and continued, each word measured. "The year the company was at its worst, I flew to 4 cities in one day. I was hospitalized with acute gastritis and pulled out the IV the next morning so I could go sign a contract. Your mother criticized me for not being a proper wife, for always being out in the world. I didn't say a word back. You got drunk and threw up all over me, and I took care of you until dawn before heading to a client meeting. Damien, have I had it easy?" His lips moved, but no sound came out. I knew he wasn't ignorant of any of it. He was simply used to it. Used to me not crying out in pain, not complaining, not fighting for myself. So when Nathan returned, all he had to do was redden his eyes, and Damien felt he needed protection, while I could always endure a little more. Damien took a step closer, trying to take my hand. I stepped back. His hand hung in the air between us. "Victoria, don't be like this." "Like what?" "Don't talk to me like it's a negotiation." I looked up at him. "Then how do you want me to talk? Cry and beg you not to cut my salary, not to give my clients to Nathan, not to let him take my position?" He was silent. I placed the small ring box on the desk between us. I took the ring off. Damien's expression changed instantly. "Victoria, resigning is a work decision. Moving out is a life decision. As for our marriage, we can go through the legal process." He looked as if he had been stung. "You want a divorce?" "I'm considering it. Just because of Nathan?" I looked at him and suddenly felt that he truly did not understand. "Not because of Nathan," I said, word by word. "It's because when you had to choose between him and me, you never once chose me." The doorbell rang. The movers had arrived. 2 men in dark work clothes stood in the entryway, saw the tense atmosphere, and moved with careful quiet. Damien stood at the study door watching me carry the boxes out one by one. He didn't try to stop me again, but at the very end he asked, voice low, "Where are you going tonight?" "A hotel. I'll drive you." "No need." I picked up my bag and walked to the entryway. Our slippers used to sit there side by side. his dark leather ones, mine the soft gray pair he had bought me 2 Christmases ago. Now mine were packed in one of the boxes. Damien followed, his voice much softer now. Victoria, you can go, but don't turn off your location sharing. I'll worry. I took out my phone and, right in front of him, turned off location sharing. From today on, you don't need to know where I am. His face paled slightly. I opened the door. From behind me, he finally called out, "Are you really sure you can let this go?" I didn't turn back. "There are too many things I couldn't let go of," I said. "But I can't afford to not let go of myself anymore." The moment the door closed, I heard something crash to the floor inside the house. Maybe it was the ring box. Maybe it was Damien's belated panic, but that was no longer a mess for me to clean up. I stood on the quiet street for a moment, the night air cool against my face. The movers loaded the last box into their van. I gave them the address of a small serviced apartment I had booked on the way home, and watched the van pull away. Then I got into the waiting car. Alex glanced at me through the rearview mirror, but didn't speak. He simply started the engine. As the car moved through the familiar streets, I opened my phone and scrolled through the screenshots I had taken that day. The Vanguard list, Damien's text telling me not to make a scene, Nathan's message about being the only person who could make Damien stop being a CEO. Each one was clear, each one was dated. Each one was evidence of a choice he had already made, long before I walked out of that conference room. I closed the gallery and leaned my head back against the seat. For 5 years I had been the one who stayed late, the one who absorbed the pressure, the one who cleaned up the aftermath so that Damien could keep the image of the composed, strategic leader. I had told myself it was partnership. I had told myself it was love. Tonight I finally understood the difference. Partnership does not require one person to disappear so the other can remain comfortable. Love does not ask you to keep making yourself smaller so someone else can feel larger. The car stopped in front of the serviced apartment building. I stepped out, paid the driver, and took the small overnight bag I had packed earlier. The lobby was quiet, the lights soft and impersonal. At the front desk I gave my name, received the key card, and rode the elevator up alone. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, exactly what I needed. No shared history, no familiar lamp, no key tray that once belonged to a different version of my life. I set the bag down, locked the door, and stood for a long time by the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere across the city, Damien was still standing in the house we had built together, perhaps staring at the empty space where the boxes had been, perhaps already calling Nathan to complain that I was being unreasonable again. It no longer mattered. I opened my laptop, connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, and began drafting a short message to the 3 major clients whose contracts I had managed. Not to solicit their business, not to undermine Horizon Tech, simply to inform them, as a matter of professional courtesy, that I was no longer with the company, and that any future communication regarding their accounts should go through the new structure. I kept the language clean, factual, and brief. When the drafts were finished, I saved them without sending. There would be time for that later. For now, I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and lay down on the unfamiliar bed. Sea leave did not come quickly. My mind kept replaying the moment Damien had stood in front of me in the lobby and asked when I had become so vindictive. The words still sat in my chest like a small, cold stone. Vindictive. As if asking to be treated with the same respect I had given for 5 years was an act of revenge. I turned onto my side and stared at the faint glow of the city outside the window. Tomorrow the real work would begin. Not the work of holding everything together for someone else, but the work of building something that belonged only to me. I closed my eyes. For the first time in a very long time, the silence around me felt like mine. The next morning I woke to the unfamiliar sound of traffic far below the window. For a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then the clean, empty walls of the serviced apartment came into focus, and the memory of the previous day settled over me like a second skin. I sat up slowly. No shared bathroom, no familiar coffee machine in the kitchen. No Damien's voice from the other room asking if I wanted eggs. Just silence and the soft gray light of early morning. I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Damien, 9 from Nathan, a long string of unread messages I did not open. Instead, I opened the email from Isla Quinn that had arrived at 9:02 a.m. Attached was a single photograph. Nathan Valjo was already sitting in my old office. He wore a cream-colored suit that looked carefully chosen for the camera. He had settled into the chair I had used for 5 years, one elbow resting on the armrest as if the space had always belonged to him. On the desk sat a hot latte in a ceramic cup that was not the one I used, and a bouquet of pink roses that still had the florist's card attached. The caption under the photo was short, "Victoria, he had the admin throw out the plant you left behind." That plant had been a gift from the team the year Horizon Tech survived its first real crisis. It had moved with me from the tiny attic office to the full-floor suite. Its leaves had still been lush the day I left. I had watered it the morning of the Vanguard meeting, the same way I always did. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I closed the email without replying. I spent the following days setting up a temporary workspace in a small serviced office 3 blocks from the apartment. The space was modest: 1 desk, 1 chair, a window that looked out onto a quiet side street, but it was mine. I brought only what I needed: my laptop, a notebook, the folders I had taken from the safe, and a single potted plant I bought on the way over. Not the same as the one that had been thrown out, but something living. I did not rush to announce anything. I simply updated my LinkedIn status to independent, notified a few trusted contacts that I was now operating on my own, and waited. I did not have to wait long. By the end of the week, 2 of the 3 major clients I had managed sent formal notices pausing their contracts with Horizon Tech. They cited changes in leadership and delivery structure and requested clarification before any further commitments. David Bennett, the largest of them, went further. He issued a formal letter of intent to terminate, stating that the continuity of the relationship had been one of the primary reasons they had stayed with Horizon Tech through difficult years. Horizon Tech's internal channels lit up almost immediately. Damien called me 3 times that morning. I let each one go to voicemail. He then sent a formal email with the subject line: "Invitation to a meeting regarding Horizon Tech project responsibilities." The content was carefully worded. The company had experienced some turbulence due to external misunderstandings. They hoped I, as the former head of strategic accounts, would attend an internal meeting to clarify the facts of the project handover and stabilize team morale. I read the email twice, then I laughed, quietly, without humor. The invitation was framed as a professional request, but it was really an attempt to get me to endorse their narrative. As long as I stood in that conference room and said the handover had been smooth, that the clients were only temporarily observing, Damien could steady the situation and paint my resignation as a personal overreaction rather than a consequence of his decisions. I typed a single sentence in reply: "I can attend, but I will only state the facts. I will not assume any subsequent responsibility for Horizon Tech." 5 minutes later he answered, agreed. I knew he had no other choice. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon in the same executive conference room where everything had begun. I spent the days leading up to it reviewing every document I had archived: the Vanguard list, the client transition plan, the budget transfers, the revised pricing proposals Nathan had pushed through, the text messages, the email timestamps. I prepared a clean slide deck, not emotional, not accusatory, just chronological and factual. On Thursday evening, I sat in my small office and looked out at the darkening street. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Gabriel Shaw. "Victoria, the delivery team is being asked to rewrite the entire summer timeline under Nathan's new pricing structure. It's not workable. A few of us are thinking about leaving. Just thought you should know," I replied. "Do what is best for yourselves. Don't stay out of loyalty to me." He sent back a simple thumbs up. Later that night, while I was still at the desk, another message arrived. This one from Claire Donovan. "Victoria, Damien tried to retract your resignation 3 days ago. The system wouldn't allow it because the handover was already complete and you had invoked the immediate termination clause. He was not happy. Be careful on Friday. I thanked her and put the phone face down. I did not sleep well that night. The service department was quiet, but my mind was not. I kept seeing the photo of Nathan in my old chair, the pink roses, the empty space where the plant had been. I kept hearing Damien's voice in the lobby asking when I had become so vindictive. I kept remembering the night 5 years ago when we had signed the papers for the first office, both of us exhausted and laughing, believing the hardest part was already behind us. It hadn't been. The hardest part had been the slow, quiet realization that the person I had built everything with no longer saw me as a partner. He saw me as a resource that could be reallocated when it became convenient. Friday morning I dressed carefully, not for him, not for the room, but for myself. A simple black blouse, dark trousers, the watch I had bought with my first real bonus after Horizon Tech turned profitable. No ring, no jewelry that carried shared history. I arrived at the building 20 minutes early and waited in a cafe across the street. From the window, I could see employees walking in and out. Some of them glanced at the cafe, perhaps recognizing me. None came over. At 1:55, I crossed the street and entered the lobby. The same receptionist who had watched me leave the week before looked up, startled. I gave her a small nod and walked toward the elevators. The executive floor felt the same and completely different. The air still carried the faint scent of the expensive diffuser they used in the reception area. The glass walls still reflected the city. But the plant that used to sit outside my office was gone, and the nameplate on the door had already been changed. I did not look at it for long. When I walked into the conference room, it was already full. Executives, key members from strategic accounts, finance, HR, and the delivery team were all present. Nathan sat in the front row looking haggard, as if sleep had been difficult for him as well. Damien stood at the front of the room. His gaze landed on me the moment I entered, and stayed there a second too long. I did not take the seat he had arranged for me near the head of the table. I sat in an empty chair near the door, close enough to leave if I needed to. Far enough that no one could mistake my presence for a return. Damien began speaking. The company has gone through some turbulence recently. There have been external misunderstandings about our internal adjustments. We've asked Victoria to come back today to clarify the facts. He looked at me. Victoria, would you like to say a few words? I stood, walked to the front, and picked up the remote, without waiting for further invitation. All right. The large screen lit up. The first slide was not the company introduction he had prepared. It was the Project Vanguard list, exactly as it had appeared the day I resigned. A low, collective intake of breath moved through the room. Damien's face tightened. Victoria, I did not look at him. Since we're here to state the facts, I said. Let's start with the facts. I pointed to the list on the screen. This is the formal demotion notice I received on the day I resigned. My name is at the top. The approver is Damien Crow, CC'd to HR, Finance, and the board office. Timestamp 9:27 a.m. before the meeting even began. Nathan's face went white. I advanced to the second slide. The client transition plan. This is the transition plan generated on Nathan Vale's third day at the company. It shows that the 3 major strategic clients I was responsible for were to be gradually transferred to the Nathan Vale Project Synergy Group within 3 months. Someone in the back whispered. So it was true. The third slide showed the budget adjustment record. This is Nathan's special budget of $150,000, sourced from the Strategic Accounts Department's Delivery Assurance budget. Harper Lane, the finance manager, lowered her head. I did not name her. I only continued. If this budget transfer had continued, it would have directly impacted the quality of the summer quarter's delivery. Damien finally spoke, voice controlled but tight. Enough. These are internal management documents, not suitable for display in a company-wide meeting. I turned to look at him fully for the first time since entering the room. Then what was the purpose of inviting me here? To have me say it was all a misunderstanding. His jaw worked once. He did not answer. I advanced the slide again. On the screen appeared the revised pricing proposal Nathan had pushed through after taking over. This is the pricing version after Nathan took over. He changed the phased delivery to a one-time all-inclusive package and cut the long-term maintenance fees to a level that could not cover costs. The head of delivery, a man who rarely spoke in large meetings, raised his voice. We objected at the time, but Mr. Vale said Mr. Crow had approved it. All eyes turned to Damien. Nathan scrambled to his feet. I didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to get results quickly so everyone would accept me. I looked at him. Wanting results doesn't mean you can use client risk as a training ground. His eyes immediately filled with tears. Victoria, why do you have to push me like this? I admit I'm not as good as you, but I really didn't have any malicious intent. After you left, everyone compared me to you. I was under so much pressure. The words were soft, wounded, carefully pitched to the room. A few of the less informed employees shifted uncomfortably. He was very good at packaging incompetence as being bullied. I advanced to the next slide. On the screen was the text message he had sent me the night I moved out. Damien said he can only stop being a CEO when he's with me. The room fell completely silent. Nathan's crying stopped mid-breath. Damien froze. I did not raise my voice. I simply asked, "Is this also work pressure?" Nathan's lips trembled. I just misspoke. You didn't misspeak, I said. You knew exactly what you wanted, and it wasn't just the job. No one in the room dared make a sound. I continued, still calm. But I'm not here today to discuss personal feelings. I am here to clarify 3 things. I held up my fingers, counting them off. First, I completed a legal and proper handover before my resignation. There was no malicious abandonment of duties. Second, the clients paused their cooperation due to changes in leadership, pricing risks, and unclear delivery responsibility, not because of any post-resignation interference from me. Third, from the effective date of my resignation, I no longer represent Horizon Tech, nor will I be responsible for any projects not authorized by me. I displayed the final slide, my resignation confirmation, the HR process record, and the clear statement of responsibility boundaries. Claire Donovan stood up. Her voice was slightly shaky, but clear. I can confirm that all of Miss Ellison's resignation procedures were compliant, and her handover materials were complete. Mr. Crow requested a retraction of the process 3 days later, but by that point the conditions for a unilateral retraction were no longer met. Damien shot her a look. Claire's face went pale, but she did not sit down. Gabriel Shaw also stood. I can confirm that Miss Ellison archived all client materials before she left. Mr. Vale later requested we provide access to her private communication notes, which we did not. Isla Quinn followed, standing as well. I can confirm that too. One by one, people who had been looking down began to look up. Damien stood at the front of the room, his face growing darker by the second. Nathan sank back into his chair, tears still on his face, but no one moved to comfort him. I turned off the PowerPoint. Mr. Crow, I've stated the facts. He stared at me, voice low and tight. Are you satisfied? I met his eyes. You still think I did this for satisfaction? He did not answer. Damien, I said. I didn't come here to get revenge on you. I came here to return the blame that doesn't belong to me. I picked up my bag. After today, I have no relationship with Horizon Tech. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, Damien's voice rose suddenly. Victoria Ellison, are you really going to cut ties so cleanly? Are you going to throw away 5 years of marriage too? Everyone in the room held their breath. I stopped and turned to face him one last time. Damien, you were the one who put our 5-year marriage on the demotion list. His face went completely ashen. I did not linger. As I walked out of the conference room, I heard the voice of the representative from the board office. Mr. Crow, the board requires a written explanation for this organizational adjustment. The door closed behind me. I stood in the hallway for a moment and let out a long, slow breath. I had not won any applause. But I had won back my integrity, and that, for the first time in a very long time, felt like enough. I walked out of the conference room and kept walking until I reached the elevator. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. Only when the doors closed and the car began to descend did I realize how tightly I had been holding my shoulders. The lobby was quieter than it had been the day I resigned. A few people glanced at me and then quickly looked away. The receptionist who had watched me leave the first time gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. I returned it and stepped out into the afternoon light. The air outside felt different, cleaner, or maybe I was simply breathing differently. I did not go back to the serviced office immediately. Instead, I walked. I walked past the cafe where I had waited that morning, past the small park where employees sometimes ate lunch, past the glass facade of Horizon Tech that no longer held any claim on me. My phone buzzed several times. I ignored it until I reached a quiet bench beneath a tree and finally looked. Mass Moss from Damien. Messages from Nathan. A short note from Claire. You were clear and professional. A few people are still talking about it. A message from Gabriel. Whatever happens next, a lot of us are proud of how you handled that. I replied only to Claire and Gabriel with brief thanks. The others I left unread. That evening I returned to the small apartment and sat by the window for a long time with the lights off. The city moved below me, ordinary and indifferent. For the first time in years, I did not feel responsible for anyone else's stability. The sensation was strange, light and heavy at the same time. Over the next few days, the consequences of the meeting continued to unfold. 2 more mid-level clients requested formal reviews of their contracts. One of the delivery leads resigned, citing fundamental differences in project philosophy. Nathan, from what I heard through quiet channels, was placed on temporary administrative leave, pending the board's review of the budget and pricing issues. Damien called twice more. I did not answer. He sent one email that began with Victoria, "We need to talk about us," and ended with a request that I reconsider the divorce. I read it once, saved it, and did not reply. On Sunday evening I received a short text from him. I'll be there tomorrow. I had chosen the time and the county clerk's office myself earlier in the week. He had waited until the last possible moment to confirm. I looked at the message for a long time and typed a single word. Okay, no extra words were necessary. That night I packed a small folder with the documents I would need. Identification, marriage certificate, the financial records from the safe, and a simple statement of the terms I was prepared to accept. I did not ask for the house. I did not ask for ongoing support. I asked only for the clear settlement of the money I had put into the company years earlier, and for the clean legal end of a marriage that had already ended in every way that mattered. I slept better than I had in weeks. Monday morning arrived cool and clear. I dressed simply, dark trousers, a white blouse, the same watch I had worn to the meeting, no jewelry that carried shared history. I left the apartment early and arrived at the county clerk's office 20 minutes before the appointment. At the entrance, a few young couples stood close together, some nervous, some smiling, some holding hands as if the world still felt possible. I watched them for a moment and remembered the day 5 years earlier when Damien and I had stood in almost the same place. He had held my hand tightly and said, "Tori, no matter how hard things get for the company, we'll get through it together." I had believed him completely. Only later did I understand that getting through it together had mostly meant I would do the getting through, while he kept the title and the vision and the public face of success. At 9 sharp, Damien arrived. He was wearing a black suit, as if he were heading to a board meeting rather than the end of a marriage. When he saw me, his pace slowed. "Been waiting long?" "No." I held out the folder of documents. "Let's go in." He did not take them. "Victoria, can we talk first?" I glanced at the short line forming behind us. "We've talked many times. I looked over those early financial records you organized last night." His voice was a little hoarse. "I just realized the money you put into the company from selling condo was never properly settled." "Yes. Why didn't you remind me?" I looked at him. "I did. After the Series B funding round, I sent you an email. You replied that we were husband and wife, there was no rush to settle it." His face went pale, he remembered. Back then the company was just starting to take off. His mother had wanted a larger house. Damien had said the cash flow was tight and asked me to wait. I had waited, and that wait had turned into years. Damien said in a low voice, "I'll pay you back. Does it have to come down to an agreement between us?" I looked at him and felt the question land with surprising lightness. Damien, agreements don't hurt relationships. People who don't respect agreements do. He was silent. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his mother, and did not answer. Immediately after, a call from Nathan came in. He still did not answer. "You can take it," I said. "It's fine." But the phone kept ringing. Finally, frustrated, he answered on speaker. Nathan's panicked voice filled the quiet space near the entrance. "Damien, the board members came to see me. They said I have to cooperate with an investigation over the budget and proposal issues. Can you please come back? I really don't know what to do." Damien closed his eyes. "Cooperate with them as they ask." Nathan sounded stunned. "But, you said you would protect me." I watched Damien's hand clench into a fist. On the other end of the line, Nathan seemed to have completely lost control. "Damien, I admit I wanted to prove myself. And I admit I don't like Victoria, but you were the one who told me to sign all those documents. You can't just push all the blame onto me now." Damien's eyes opened. Nathan continued, the words tumbling out. "I came back because you promised me a position. You said Victoria was strong and wouldn't really mind these things. You said she was your wife and would clean up the mess in the end." People were coming and going around us. Damien stood frozen, his face slowly turning gray. Nathan was still sobbing. Damien, I'm not a bad person. I was just scared. I was scared I'd have nothing. Scared you would go back to her in the end. That's why I wanted her position. I wanted everyone to acknowledge me." Damien hung up the phone. He looked as if he had finally been forced to hear something he had always known but never allowed himself to name. He turned to me, a momentary panic in his eyes. "Victoria, let's go in," I interrupted. His voice was raw. I didn't know he thought that way. "You knew," I said quietly. "You just enjoyed being needed by him. And you enjoyed me cleaning up after you." His lips moved, but no rebuttal came. We walked inside. At the counter, the clerk verified our documents and asked the required question in a neutral voice. "Are both of you here voluntarily?" "I am," I said. Damien did not answer right away. The clerk looked up at him. He was holding the pen, the veins on the back of his hand standing out. Just then his phone buzzed again, this time the board office. He glanced at it but did not answer. The clerk repeated the question. "Sir, are you voluntarily filing for divorce?" Damien looked at me. In that moment his eyes held something I had waited years to see: regret, pain, reluctance. But it was too late for any of it to change the outcome. I met his gaze calmly. "Damien, don't make me wait for you again." His eyes reddened. After a long silence he whispered, "I am." The process was faster than I expected. Forms were signed. Stamps were applied. When I received the divorce certificate, the morning sun was shining directly onto the counter. The small red booklet felt surprisingly light, too light to contain the end of a 5-year marriage. But it did. We walked out of the building together. Damien followed a half step behind me. "Victoria." I stopped. His voice was low. "If I had never let Nathan join the company, would we not be like this?" I considered the question honestly. Maybe it would have happened later. He looked taken aback. "The problem was never just Nathan," I said. "It was that you always believed I would never leave." The wind moved through the trees along the street, lifting a strand of my hair. Damien raised his hand as if to brush it away the way he used to. I stepped back, his hand froze in midair. "Don't do that anymore," I said. He slowly lowered his hand. "What will you do now?" I finished the sentence for both of us. "I'll be fine." It was not said to comfort him. It was said to remind myself. A car pulled up at the curb. Before I got in, Damien asked one last question. "Can I still contact you?" I looked at him for a long moment. "For work, there's no need. For personal matters, even less." He had no reply. I opened the car door and got in. As the vehicle pulled away, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. Damien was still standing at the entrance of the building, holding the divorce certificate, as if he had only just realized that something he had always assumed would stay had finally left. I did not cry. I simply opened my phone, changed his contact name from Damien to his full legal name, and then unpinned him from the top of my contacts list. The city moved past the window. Ordinary, indifferent, free for the first time in 5 years, so was I. The car carried me away from the county clerk's office and back toward the small apartment that still did not feel like home. I held the divorce certificate in my lap for most of the ride, turning it over once or twice as if the weight of the paper might somehow match the weight of the 5 years it had just ended. It never did. The booklet remained light, almost fragile, the official seal still slightly raised under my thumb. When the driver stopped in front of the building, I thanked him, stepped out, and rode the elevator up alone. Inside the apartment, I placed the certificate on the desk beside my laptop and stood looking at it for a long time. Then I opened the top drawer, slid it inside, and closed the drawer quietly. That simple action felt more final than the signatures at the counter. The rest of the day passed in a strange, suspended quiet. I answered a few professional emails that had nothing to do with Horizon Tech. I ordered groceries for the first time since moving in. I watered the small plant on the windowsill. Ordinary tasks that once would have been fitted around Damien's schedule or the company's emergencies now belonged entirely to me. The freedom was real, but it still felt unfamiliar, like clothes that fit correctly yet had not yet softened to the shape of my body. In the late afternoon, Claire Donovan sent a short message. The board meeting ran long. Nathan has been formally suspended pending full review. Damien is under pressure to provide a written explanation by end of week. Just thought you should know. You don't have to reply. I typed back a simple thank you and left it at that. Gabriel followed an hour later with a different kind of update. 2 more people from the delivery team put in their notice today. They're not asking for references from Damien. They're asking if you'd be open to a conversation later. No pressure. I sat with that message longer than the first. For years, I had been the person others came to when things went wrong inside the company. The instinct to fix, to protect, to hold the structure together was still there. But the structure was no longer mine to hold. I replied carefully, I'm not rebuilding anything that belongs to Horizon Tech. If people want to talk about their own next steps, I'm willing to listen. That's all. Gabriel's answer came quickly. Understood. That's more than fair. Evening settled over the city. I made a simple dinner and ate it by the window, watching the lights come on in buildings I no longer had any reason to recognize. My phone remained silent for longer stretches than it had in years. No messages asking where I was. No requests to review a proposal before morning. No soft, urgent calls from Damien that always managed to sound both apologetic and entitled at the same time. When a message finally did arrive, it was from an unexpected number, David Bennett, the client who had issued the formal letter of intent to terminate Victoria. I heard the internal meeting did not go the way Horizon Tech hoped. I'm not writing to discuss their situation. I'm writing to say that the continuity and judgment you brought to our account over the years was the reason we stayed as long as we did. If you decide to operate independently, I would like to schedule a conversation. No rush. Whenever you're ready. I read the message twice. Then I saved it without answering. Not because I intended to refuse, but because I needed the decision to come from a clear place rather than from residual anger or the desire to prove something. That night I slept without the restless half-waking that had followed me for weeks. When I opened my eyes in the morning, the apartment was filled with ordinary daylight, and for the first time the silence did not feel like absence, it felt like space. I spent the next several days establishing a basic structure for the life I was building. I opened a new business banking account. I met with a lawyer to finalize the financial settlement Damien had finally agreed to regarding the money from the condo. The process was civil, almost distant. Documents were exchanged through counsel. No personal messages accompanied them. I signed what needed to be signed and felt no particular satisfaction, only the quiet relief of closing another unfinished ledger. Isla Quinn called once, her voice careful. I just wanted to make sure you're all right. People are still talking about the meeting. Some of them are saying you were too harsh. Most of them are saying it was a long time coming. I'm all right, I told her. Harsh would have been staying and letting the same pattern continue. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "The plant is gone, by the way. Nathan had it removed the same day he moved into the office. I thought you should know, even though it doesn't change anything." "It doesn't," I agreed. "But thank you for telling me." After the call ended, I sat looking at the small plant on my own windowsill. It was younger, less established, still adjusting to the light in the new space. I watered it and left it alone. Midway through the week, I finally replied to David Bennett. "I'm open to a conversation. I'm not taking on anything that requires me to step back into the same dynamics I left. If that still interests you, I'm available next week." His response came within the hour. We set a time. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe far from Horizon Tech's building. David was direct, the way he had always been in business. "I'm not interested in punishing them," he said. "I'm interested in continuity and competence. You provided both. If you're building something of your own, I want to understand what that looks like before I make any final decisions about the existing contract." I was equally direct. "I'm not building a smaller version of what I left. I'm not interested in becoming the person who cleans up after other people's strategic decisions anymore. Any work I take on will have clear scope, clear authority, and clear accountability. If that aligns with what you need, we can talk further. If it doesn't, I understand." He studied me for a moment, then nodded once. "That's clearer than most proposals I've heard this year. Send me an outline when you're ready." We parted without drama, no promises, no residual loyalty tests, just a professional conversation between two people who had worked well together and might do so again under different terms. Walking back to the apartment afterward, I realized something had shifted. The anger that had carried me through the resignation and the meeting and the divorce had not disappeared, but it had quieted. In its place was something steadier, an attention to what I actually wanted to build rather than what I needed to escape. That evening, Damien's lawyer sent the final settlement documents for the condo funds. I reviewed them carefully, signed, and returned them. No accompanying note, no attempt at personal contact. The channel remained formal, and I preferred it that way. Later, while I was organizing the last of the files I had taken from the house, I found a photograph I had forgotten. It was from the night we signed the lease on the first Horizon Tech office. Damien and I stood in the empty space, both of us tired and smiling, his arm around my shoulders. On the back, I had written the date and a single sentence. "Beginning." I looked at the image for a long time. Then I placed it in an envelope, sealed it, and put it in the drawer with the divorce certificate, not out of bitterness, simply because that chapter had a clear ending now, and I no longer needed to keep its artifacts in open view. Night came again. I made tea, opened my laptop, and began drafting the outline David had asked for. The work felt different from every proposal I had written inside Horizon Tech. There was no need to anticipate Damien's preferences, no need to leave room for someone else's last-minute changes, no need to absorb risk that properly belonged to another decision-maker. I wrote until the outline was clean and complete. Then I saved it, closed the laptop, and sat in the quiet. Outside, the city continued its ordinary movement. Inside, for the first time in a very long time, the future felt like something I was allowed to shape, rather than something I was required to endure. I did not know yet how large, or how small that future would be. I only knew that it belonged to me, and that, after everything, was enough to begin. The outline I sent David Bennett was concise. 8 pages, no excess language, no soft promises. I described the scope I was willing to take on, the decision rights I required, and the boundaries I would not cross again. 2 days later, he replied with a short note and a proposed call. We spoke on a Tuesday morning. His voice was the same as it had always been in our previous working relationship: direct, unsentimental, focused on outcomes. "I've reviewed what you sent," he said. "It's clearer than most of the materials I've received from Horizon Tech in the last 6 months. I'm prepared to move the account under a new structure with you as the primary point of contact, provided the commercial terms remain reasonable and the delivery model is stable." I did not pretend surprise or gratitude beyond what was professional. "I can prepare a formal proposal by the end of the week. I'll need written confirmation that authority sits with me on scope, pricing adjustments, and escalation paths. If those conditions are acceptable, we can proceed." "They are," he said. "Send it when it's ready." After the call ended, I sat for a while with my hands resting on the closed laptop. The conversation had been ordinary in the best sense of the word. No undercurrents. No need to manage someone else's ego or anticipate a last-minute override. Just two adults discussing work that needed to be done well. I spent the rest of the day drafting the formal proposal. When it was finished, I sent it without second-guessing the tone or the terms. Then I closed the laptop and went for a long walk through a part of the city I had rarely visited during the years at Horizon Tech. The streets were ordinary. People moved through their own errands, their own conversations, their own quiet urgencies. None of them knew or cared that I had spent 5 years building something that no longer belonged to me. The anonymity felt like a form of rest. In the days that followed, other, small pieces of information reached me through careful channels. Claire sent a brief update that the board had formally censured the handling of the Vanguard process and required Damien to submit a full accounting of the client transition decisions. Nathan remained on suspension. 2 more people from the original strategic accounts team had resigned. Gabriel had accepted an offer elsewhere and asked, through Claire, whether I would be willing to speak as a reference. I said yes. None of these updates carried the charge they once would have. I read them, filed the information away, and returned to my own work. One evening, while I was reviewing the final version of the Bennett proposal before sending the signed copy, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It was short: "This is Damien. I won't call. I just need to know if the settlement funds cleared on your end." I stared at the message for a long moment. The formality of it, the careful distance, the fact that he had used a different number. All of it told me more than the words themselves. I replied with equal restraint: "They cleared." "Thank you for confirming." He did not write back. I set the phone face down and returned to the document. The numbers on the settlement were exact. The money from the condo I had sold years earlier to keep the company alive had finally been returned, adjusted for time and documented with clean paperwork. It did not feel like victory. It felt like the closing of a ledger that should never have remained open for so long. Later that night, I found myself thinking about the early years with a clarity that had been impossible while I was still inside the marriage. I remembered the rented apartment with the uneven floors, the nights we ate instant noodles over printed financial projections, the way Damien used to fall asleep mid-sentence when the pressure became too much. I had loved that version of him. The one who still admitted uncertainty, the one who still looked at me as if we were building the same thing. Somewhere along the way, that version had been replaced by a man who needed to be needed by someone softer, someone who would not challenge the story he told himself about his own leadership. Nathan had arrived at the exact moment that need became stronger than the partnership. I had been too busy holding the company together to notice the shift until it was already complete. The realization no longer cut as sharply as it once had. It simply sat there, factual and finished. By the end of the week, David Bennett's team returned the signed agreement. The first payment under the new structure arrived in my business account 2 days later. I transferred a portion into a separate savings account I had opened solely for future operating reserves, then sat looking at the remaining balance for a long time. It was not large by the standards of Horizon Tech's old contracts. It was, however, entirely mine. earned under terms I had set, delivered under authority I controlled. That evening I cooked a proper meal for the first time since the divorce. Nothing elaborate, just food that required attention and time. I ate it slowly at the small table. By the window, the city lights steady beyond the glass. When I finished, I washed the dishes by hand rather than leaving them. The way I used to, when every hour had to be rationed between Damien's schedule and the company's demands, small acts. Ordinary reclaiming, Isla called the following afternoon. Her voice carried a different quality than the careful tone she had used in earlier conversations. I resigned today, she said. I gave 2 weeks. I didn't want to leave without telling you. I was quiet for a moment. Are you all right? I will be. Watching the way things were handled after you left made it clear I didn't want to stay and become part of the cleanup. A few of us are talking about what comes next. Nothing formal yet. I just needed you to know I didn't stay silent because I agreed with what happened. I never thought you did, said. Take the time you need. The rest will sort itself. After the call ended, I stood by the window for a long while. People were choosing their own exits now. Some would land well. Some would not. None of it was mine to manage. That night I dreamed of the old office. Not the large suite on the executive floor, but the first cramped space with the water-stained ceiling tiles. In the dream I was packing boxes again, but this time the boxes contained only my own things, and the door stood open behind me, with no one trying to close it. I woke before the dream resolved, the feeling of the open door still clear in my chest. I made coffee and carried it to the desk. The Bennett proposal was already in motion. 2 other quiet inquiries had arrived through former colleagues who had left Horizon Tech in the past month. I answered each one with the same clarity I had given David. I would discuss work that came with clean authority and clean accountability. I would not step back into any structure that required me to absorb the consequences of decisions I did not control. The responses were measured and, so far, respectful. Toward the end of the week, a letter arrived by courier. The return address was Damien's personal lawyer. Inside was a short formal note, confirming that all remaining joint accounts had been closed, and that the final transfer of title documents related to the marital home would be completed within 10 business days. I read it once, filed it, and felt nothing more than the quiet satisfaction of administrative completion. I did not wonder how Damien was spending his evenings. I did not check whether Nathan's suspension had been lifted. Those questions belonged to a life I had already left. On Saturday morning, I took the small plant from the windowsill and repotted it into a larger container. The roots had begun to press against the sides of the original pot. I worked slowly, careful not to damage them, then set the plant back in the light, and watered it thoroughly. Dirt remained under my fingernails afterward. I did not mind. In the afternoon, I walked to a nearby stationery shop and bought a new notebook. Plain, hardcover, no monogram. I carried it home and wrote the date on the first page. Beneath it, I listed 3 things I intended to protect going forward: my time, my judgment, and the right to leave any room that required me to become smaller in order to stay. It was not a dramatic declaration. It was simply a record. Evening came again. I prepared another simple meal, ate without hurry, and then sat with the notebook open in front of me. Outside, the city continued its ordinary noise. Inside, the apartment held a quiet that no longer felt temporary. I did not know yet how large the independent work would become. I did not know which of the quiet inquiries would turn into lasting partnerships. I only knew that every decision now moved through a single filter. Whether it required me to abandon myself in order to keep it. For 5 years I had answered that question the wrong way, over and over, telling myself it was temporary, telling myself it was love, telling myself the bigger picture justified the smaller and smaller space I was willing to occupy. I would not answer it that way again. I closed the notebook, turned off the desk lamp, and went to bed while the city was still awake. Sleep came without the old restlessness. When I woke in the night, the darkness of the room felt neutral rather than lonely. I turned over, settled again, and let the hours pass without needing to fill them with anyone else's emergencies. Morning would come with its own work. I would meet it as myself. That, finally, was enough. 3 months after the divorce certificate was issued, the small serviced apartment no longer felt temporary. The plant on the windowsill had grown fuller. The notebook on the desk had filled more than half its pages with dated entries, some practical, some reflective, none of them written for anyone else's approval. The work with David Bennett had moved from proposal to active delivery. 2 additional former clients had followed under similarly clear terms. The income was steady enough to cover the life I was building and to leave a margin I had never allowed myself while I was still measuring every decision against Horizon Tech's needs. I did not expand quickly. I refused 2 projects that would have required me to absorb the same patterns I had left. Unclear authority, last-minute overrides, the expectation that I would quietly repair what others broke. Each refusal felt cleaner than the last. News of Horizon Tech reached me only in fragments, and only when I chose to hear it. Claire sent occasional, carefully neutral updates. The board had required structural changes in how major client transitions were approved. Nathan's suspension had ended with a quiet departure rather than a formal termination. The official language called it a mutual decision. Damien remained CEO, but the public tone of the company had grown more cautious. Gabriel had settled into a new role elsewhere and sent a single message months later. "You were right to leave the way you did. A lot of us see it more clearly now." I thanked him and did not ask for further details. One afternoon in early autumn, I received a letter from Damien's lawyer. It was brief and formal. The final transfer of title for the marital home had been completed. The house was his alone. A short clause confirmed that all joint financial obligations had been resolved. I read the letter once, filed it with the other closed documents, and felt no pull toward the rooms I had once designed. The lamp I had chosen, the key tray from Kyoto, the slippers that used to sit side by side. None of them belonged to the life I was living now. That same week, I moved into a slightly larger apartment farther from the old Horizon Tech building. The new space had better light and a small balcony where the plant could sit outside on warm days. I unpacked slowly, placing only the things that still felt like mine. The photograph from the first office lease remained in its sealed envelope, in a drawer. I did not open it. On the evening of the move, I stood on the balcony with a cup of tea and watched the sky shift from blue to the soft gray of dusk. The city looked the same as it always had. I did not. The difference was quiet and structural. I no longer scanned every situation for the places where I would be expected to yield. I no longer measured my worth by how much pressure I could absorb without complaint. The habit had been deep, but it was no longer in charge. I thought about the 5 years, with a steadiness that had taken time to arrive. There had been real partnership in the beginning, shared exhaustion, shared belief. Nights when we had looked at the same uncertain future, and chosen to keep going. That part had been true. What came later had also been true. The gradual replacement of partnership with hierarchy, the way my reliability had been treated as an infinite resource. The moment Damien decided that my place was to make room, rather than to stand beside him. I did not need him to understand it in the same way I did. Understanding was no longer something I required from him in order to move forward. A few weeks after the move, David Bennett invited me to a short working dinner with 2 of his senior directors. The conversation stayed on the work. When it ended, one of the directors said, almost in passing, "It's rare to deal with someone who states limits so clearly and then keeps them. Most people eventually fold under pressure." I answered without performance. "I folded for a long time. I'm finished with that." She nodded once, as if the statement required no further comment. Walking home afterward, I realized I had stopped bracing for the old reflex, the urge to soften the edge of what I had said, to leave room for someone else's comfort. The absence of that reflex felt like recovered space inside my own chest. Winter arrived early that year. I spent the first cold weekend organizing the last of the files I had brought from the marriage: bank records, early contracts, the settlement documents, the divorce certificate. I placed them in a single archival box, labeled it with the year range, and set it on a high shelf in the closet, not hidden, simply finished. That night I dreamed again of the first office, but this time the dream was different. The boxes were already packed. The door stood open. I walked out into ordinary daylight and did not look back. When I woke, the feeling of the open door remained, quiet and complete. In the months that followed, the independent work continued to grow at a pace I controlled. I hired one contractor for specialized delivery support, then a second. Both relationships were structured with the same clarity I now required for myself. I declined a larger opportunity that would have required me to rebuild something too similar to the old strategic account structure. The decision cost short-term revenue and protected long-term autonomy. I did not regret it. Occasionally, late at night, I still turned over specific memories. The sound of Damien's voice when he used the phrase, "the bigger picture," the expression on Nathan's face when the text message appeared on the conference room screen, the exact weight of the ring when I placed it in my purse that first day. The memories no longer arrived with the same sharp heat. They had become information rather than open wounds. One evening in the new year, I received a final unexpected message from Damien. It came through his lawyer's office as a forwarded note, as if even he understood that direct contact was no longer appropriate. "I hope you're well. I've had time to look at the early years more carefully. I see some things I didn't see then. I don't expect a reply. I read it twice. Then I archived it without answering." There was nothing left that required my words. Whatever understanding he had reached belonged to him. My own understanding had already been paid for in full. Spring returned. The plant on the balcony put out new leaves. I stood outside one morning with coffee and watched the light move across the neighboring rooftops. The city was the same city it had always been. I was not the same woman who had once sat in a conference room and watched her name appear at the top of a demotion list while the man she had built a life with refused to meet her eyes. I had left that room. I had left the marriage. I had left the version of myself who believed that enduring was the same as loving. What remained was simpler and stronger. The right to decide the shape of my own days, the refusal to make myself smaller for anyone's comfort, and the quiet knowledge that I had finally chosen my own side. I finished the coffee, went inside, and opened the notebook to a clean page. I wrote the date. Beneath it I wrote only one sentence. "I am no longer waiting to be chosen." Then I closed the notebook, set it aside, and began the day's work. The future was not dramatic. It did not arrive with applause or vindication. It arrived the way ordinary mornings do. With light, with tasks that belonged to me, and with the steady absence of anyone else's claim on my life. I met it without flinching. That was the ending I had earned, and the beginning I would keep.